Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to do my January book haul. And I'm slightly embarrassed about my January book haul, more so than usual. I'm usually pretty embarrassed by my book hauls. However, I recently posted my whole Project TBR, gonna tackle my TBR video, and I intended to post that after my January book haul went up. However, I had it ready, so I just posted it without thinking. So this is slightly embarrassing because I have a huge haul of books to show you, and I've been strutting around talking about how I'm going to reduce my TBR. Ignore me. So I have a ton of books to get through today. These haul videos are so long. They are so long. So I'm going to try to rip through these pretty quick, but knowing me, I say that at the beginning of every video and then I forget about halfway through and just start rambling. But I'm going to try to actually make this reasonable because this will be 45 minutes long otherwise. I have a buttload of books to show you guys. They are primarily sci-fi and fantasy, a little bit of horror. I hauled some books that I've already read and I'm adding to my shelves. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. As per usual, I'm going to divide these into the books that I was sent for review by publishers and my books that I bought or acquired in some other exciting way. All of these books are going to be linked down below. I am not going to go hugely in depth into what they're about or else we'll be here for 2.5 hours. But if you are interested, you can go ahead and check them out, look at the descriptions. As I said, I'm going to try to get through this quickly. We'll see how it goes. Right, so the first books that I have to show you are from Orbit Books, and I'm very excited about both of these. The first being The Wolf of Oren-Yaro by K.S. Veloso. This comes out in February, in early February. This is a book that was originally self-published, I believe, and it got picked up for traditional publishing by Orbit. And I had been hearing a lot of really good things about the self-published book, but I also heard about those things once it had been acquired by Orbit. So knowing that self-published books do often get a big edit when they are acquired by traditional publishers, I decided to hold off on reading it until I got a copy of the new version. So I have this now. I talk about this a lot. I've talked about it in my recent TBR, which I can link for you guys. I talked about it in anticipated reads, all of that. It's a high fantasy book, or an epic fantasy book, following a sort of queen on a very shaky throne. Just before her coronation, her husband, who she had married in a political alliance and has a child with, just leaves. We don't know why, and this makes her sort of rule even more shaky. 5 years later, she gets a letter from her estranged husband asking to meet. Turns out to be a trap and an assassination attempt. She has to go all badass and be totally awesome. This sounds amazing. I'm so excited to read this book, and I think it's going to be really fantastic. I'm a little bit out of my reading mojo. A couple of things have thrown me off from my reading recently, but this is going to be the next book that I pick up that I haven't already started because I'm in the middle of 10 right now. And the second book from Orbit is Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez. This looks super fun, and I have taken a glimpse at this. I've read the first chapter and I'm completely sold on it. It is a sci-fi space opera, kind of fun bantery type book, which I haven't had a good history with in terms of YA. However, this is an adult book, so I think that that is probably the reason that I am enjoying this much more than things like, say, Aurora Rising or Spellhacker, which I tried to read recently. But this follows a young woman who is the captain of a ship. Her sister gets kidnapped and she has to take on all these dangerous jobs to make up the ransom. There are hot insectoid alien type crew members. There are psychic cats, which are in the opening chapter and are just amazing. There's really solid banter and there's a lot of great representation because she is Spanish speaking. So this is super fun. I'm really enjoying this so far. This also comes out in February. Right, so moving on to a book I did read in January, so you can go ahead and check out my thoughts in my wrap-up video. This is The Deep by River Solomon with David Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. As I say, I talk about this book. It's really fantastic. I think the writing might get in the way of some people's enjoyment because it is sort of written in a very lyrical style. It's not necessarily the most straightforward. However, I really enjoyed that. This book follows the descendants of the unborn babies of African slave women who were captured and being brought over the Atlantic during the Atlantic slave trade and thrown overboard because they were viewed as a drain on resources. These babies survived and they kind of evolved into essentially mermaids called the Wajinru, and our main character Yetu is the historian for her people. She kind of holds the collective memories of her people so that her people can be free and not be burdened by their incredibly painful history. This is wonderful, it's really fantastic, it's thought-provoking, and it's just excellent. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Again, you can hear a little bit more in that wrap-up. Next is a book I've been hearing a lot about, especially from authors that I really, really like. Tasha Suri read this and really enjoyed this, so I'm very, very pumped for this. This is Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn. This is I believe it's a debut YA historical fantasy book set during the French Revolution, and it follows a girl who is part of a group of rebels who are rescuing aristocrats from the guillotine. However, one of the people who they rescue turns out to be a little bit more than they think she is. She's got a little bit more going on than what they see. This looks really great. I've heard it's really fantastic. I believe it's an FF romance, and I cannot wait to read this. I am going to hold off a little bit because it comes out in May, so I've got lots of time. But you'll be able to see this book in a wrap-up hopefully very soon. Next up, I have Howling Dark by Christopher Rocchio. This comes out from Glance. I think it's already out now, actually. This is the paperback. It was originally hardcovered, and this is the sequel to a book I have just off screen somewhere. What's it called? Empire of Silence. This is the sequel to Empire of Silence, which is a debut novel that came out, I think, in 2018. It's massive, like that big, and I never got around to reading that, but I really want to. I've heard it's a fantastic blend of sci-fi and fantasy. I'll link both down below if you're curious, because I don't know anything about these except that people love them. Next up from Titan Books is Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. This is one I'm so excited for. I was looking forward to it anyway, and a bunch of people have commented since that they have read this and really, really enjoyed it. I think it came out last year in the US, and we're just getting it in the UK in February. So this book takes place in a library in hell, which is just sounds amazing. And our head librarian Claire has to kind of wrangle characters who try to escape from their books. A hero escapes from his book in search of his author, and she has to go track him down, and something about this has huge implications for hell and earth and all that good stuff. So this looks really fun. A lot of you guys have said that you really enjoyed this, and I cannot wait to read it. Moving on, we have The Queen's Assassin by Melissa de la Cruz. This is a YA fantasy book that comes out from Putnam Books, and this is one I think I featured in my TBR. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm a little bit apprehensive because I have struggled with this kind of YA fantasy recently, but hopefully this is the one that's gonna like kick me back into the genre. So this book follows an assassin who is the best at doing assassiny things, and he is bound to the queen and he can never leave her service unless she releases him. Then we have a young woman who would love to be an assassin, however her family expects her to become a lady of the court. Naturally they're gonna meet, there's gonna be a huge web of conspiracies, all that good stuff. I think I will like this if I'm in the mood to read it. I'm very curious to see if I try it this month, if I'm going to be able to get into it or not. We will see. This might be one that gets shelved for a later date though. Next up from Hotter and Stoughton, I have Incendiary by Zoraia Cordova. This book takes place, I believe, in not during Spanish Inquisition Spain, but a world inspired by the Inquisition, and it looks really, really fantastic. I know a couple people who have been reading it and have really, really enjoyed it. I don't know a huge amount about this one, but I'm very, very excited to read it. I've never read any of her books before, however, I do have Labyrinth Lost on my February TBR. And the last book that I have from publishers this month is my favorite book title, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This book follows a woman named Patricia, and she is kind of stuck in a rut with her life. Her husband is too busy for her. She feels like her life is very small. She's looking after the kids, everything like that. And she ends up joining a book club of a very close-knit group of women in Charleston. However, Patricia gets attacked by an elderly neighbor, and that neighbor's relative, who's very young and handsome, is James Harris. He comes into her life, and she sort of is feeling all these things she's never felt before, but there's something kind of off about James, and I suspect from the title we know exactly what that may be. This looks so fun. I have never read any Grady Hendrix books, however I do have My Best Friend's Exorcism and We Sold Our Soul on my shelf. It's time I actually get around to reading him. His books look so fun. Okay, so now we are moving on to the books that I bought or just kind of acquired for myself. I'm going to split this into three. The first being used copies that I picked up. Some of these are from the charity shop that's just down the street. Some of these are from D-stashes from other people. And one of these is from the free bookshelf that's at work. So, first things first, I picked up a couple of things off of someone's D-stash. They were getting rid of some of their books, and I bought them off of them for really cheap. So the first being The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross. This is a YA fantasy. I think it is it Poisony? It might actually be Poisony. But it's, I think, just kind of like standard YA fantasy. It was one that I wanted to read ages ago, but just completely missed me. So I decided to go ahead and get a used copy for very cheap. I also picked up a copy of one of my favorite books ever. This is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This is mad, absolutely just batshit crazy book, but it's all about PTSD. In the Second World War, and he himself fought in World War II and witnessed the bombing of Dresden, and that inspires the book a lot. It's really, really fantastic. Don't take it at surface level because that's not the kind of book that it is, but it's one of my absolute favorites, and I used to have a copy of it in the States, but when I moved over here, I ended up having to get rid of most of my books, so I lost my copy of Slaughterhouse-Five, as well as a lot of other Vonnegut books. And then I also got a copy of Karen Memory by Elizabeth Bear. This, I think, is steampunky goodness. I think it's sort of westerny, but also steampunky, and I think it follows a group of characters who work in a brothel, I think. I remember when this came out. It was ages ago. It's 5 years old or so at this point, but I was really interested in reading it. I bought it on ebook years ago, I think on my Nook, and never got around to it. So when I saw it, I remembered that I really wanted to read it, so decided to pick it up. Then I got 4 books from the charity shop, the first being a copy of The Two Towers that I don't have. If you don't know, I happen to collect editions of the Lord of the Rings books, so whenever I see one that I don't already own, I pick it up. I don't have any of the other ones in this particular set, so that's quite exciting. So this is going to be put on top of my pile. I'm going to get a bookshelf for my Lord of the Rings and my Harry Potter books, so it's just going on a shelf on my desk until that happens. Then I have Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. This is one of the Discworld books in which there are like 40 plus. I've only read The Color of Magic and I didn't particularly enjoy it, but I'm going to give him another go. I saw a bunch of them at the charity shop and asked some friends who love Pratchett which one I should get, and this one was suggested, so I'm very excited to read this. Then I picked up a copy of Daughter of the Empire, which has a fabulous cover. It's ridiculous. I used to have this when I was a kid, and I bought it after seeing Lord of the Rings, when I bought a ton of fantasy, not really knowing what I wanted from fantasy, and never ended up reading it, so I went ahead and picked this up. This is by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wirtz, who are both sort of bigwigs of kind of classic fantasy. Very curious about this one. I don't know much about it. I think it's East Asian inspired, though. And then a few people who have known me for a very long time who are watching this may laugh, because this is now the 4th copy of this book that I've owned. This is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I have tried to read this book so many times. I had a hardcover that I picked up at the Strand in New York for like $3, and then I had a paperback version, and then I had a Nook version, and I never ended up reading any of them. And so I finally picked up this book. This is historical fantasy. It's set in the Victorian period, which is perfect for me because I studied Victorian literature at university and I love the Victorians. Although you don't see a lot of them on my channel, I love Victorian literature. So this is, in theory, like the perfect book for me, but I've never read it. It is massive. And let's see how many pages it is. 900... Ooh, are we gonna make it across 1,000? 1,006 pages long. I would love to read this at some point, but it's definitely going to be a project because it is quite long, so we'll see how it goes. And then, because it was on the free bookshelf at work, I got The Bear and the Serpent by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I've got the first book in this series on the shelf. I've already bought it. I saw the second one. I figure it's Adrian Tchaikovsky. I'm gonna read the first at some point. I might as well pick up the second for free. Then I had a little Bookish meetup with some of my absolute favorite people from the Bookish community, and we hit some bookshops. We had some tea, we had some cake, and we went to Blackwell's and the Waterstones here in Oxford. So, we all went a little wild. I didn't buy the most, for sure, but I did end up buying 6 books on that trip. The first being Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I recently watched the movie in theaters and I absolutely adored it. I've never read this before. I had never seen an adaptation. I knew that one of them does a horrible thing to Jo that my sister hated, and which became very obvious very quickly what that was watching the film, and I knew that one of them died, and as soon as I saw that particular sister coughing on screen, I was like, goner. But that was all I knew about that. Going into the film, I adored the film and wanted to go ahead and pick up a copy. I don't know when I'm going to get the chance to read this. I am trying to go back to classics a little bit more ever since I read The Unlikely Escape of Uriah Heep. I am very slowly but surely working on David Copperfield, so I'm probably going to wait until after that book to read this one. Then I picked up a copy of The Cheerleaders by Cara Thomas. Someone, I don't know who it was, but someone said that this might be something I really enjoy. I went through a YA crime binge last year, I think in October or so, and I read a ton of crime fiction and also YA crime fiction, and someone recommended this. If it was you, please let me know. But it follows a character named Monica, and there's a car accident at her school, near her school, and not long after that, murders start to happen, and her sister is the last cheerleader to die. So after Monica's sister's suicide, the cheerleading squad is disbanded, and 5 years later, Monica's world starts to unravel. There are letters in her dad's desk, an unearthed years-old cell phone, and a strange new friend at school, and it's very clear that whatever happened 5 years ago is not done. This sounds great. It sounds really, really fun. This looks like the perfect thing to just curl up with and blast through over a Saturday or a Sunday. I'm really looking forward to this. I don't read a lot of contemporary YA, but this is YA crime, so that is definitely a little bit more in my wheelhouse. Then I have Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I have been wanting to try one of Mira Grant's books for ages, because if you're unaware, this is actually a pen name for Seanan McGuire, who writes the Wayward Children series of novellas, which I absolutely adore. They're some of my favorite fantasy books. The 5th one just arrived. It's going to be in my February haul, and I'm like so pumped to read it. I think I'm going to pick it up this weekend. Anyway, really looking forward to this. I have said a couple of times over the past few videos, I'm trying to get a little bit more into horror, and this is apparently horror and features very creepy mermaids, which is like so just like perfect for me. I think this is going to be a really great read for me. I don't know a huge amount about it. I don't know a huge amount about Mira Grant's books, but I know there's another one called Feed, which features zombies. So I know if I like this one, I can move on to that one. Seanan McGuire has written a million things, and I'm super excited to dip into her back catalog. Then we have Born by Jeff Vandermeer. I actually read Annihilation and didn't particularly enjoy it last year. However, I really liked his writing style and I really loved his mad ideas. So I wanted to give another one of his books a try. I probably won't be finishing that series, but I wanted to give this one a shot because I think the second book just came out and I've heard really amazing things about this. I don't know a huge amount about what it's about, like the back copy is really short, but it's something about a creepy, weird bear creature that this woman named Rachel names Born, and weird shit happens. That's all I know. It looks really, really good. The US cover is also really good for this one. I really like his writing style, I like his imagination, and I have a sneaking suspicion that this one might be a little bit more, hopefully, straightforward than Annihilation was. That book just didn't quite work for me, but I have very high hopes for this one. Then I picked up at the recommendation of one of the booksellers at Blackwell's, To Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer. I believe this is a sci-fi dystopia book. I have seen this everywhere. I have no clue what it's about, but he was saying that it was really good, and judging from the things that he was recommending to other people, he has very good taste. I wish I got his name. But this looks really fantastic. It is set in the world 2454, and humanity has engineered a hard-won golden age. 7 factions or hives have co-governed the world for 3 centuries, their rule fueled by careful censorship, oracular statistical analysis, and technological abundance. Convicted for his crimes, Mycroft Canner is an indentured instrument and confidant for some of the world's most powerful figures. He has his own secrets. This looks great. This looks like one of those that's just like impossible to kind of summarize. I have a sneaking suspicion that this book is a lot bigger than that. And I think this is a series that is well into its publication. So yeah, it looks like there's 3 books out so far. So if I enjoy this one, I can go ahead and dive into the rest of them, which is very exciting. Last but not least, for that particular book trip, I picked up a copy of Lady Hotspur by Tessa Gratton. I have a copy of The Queens of Innis Lear on my shelf. I have not read it yet, but I am very much looking forward to it because it is a retelling of King Lear, and this is, I think, a companion novel to The Queens of Innis Lear. I don't think it's a direct sequel. I may be wrong about that. I have been completely unable to find out if that is the case or not, so if you've read those 2 books, please let me know. I haven't really looked into what this is about quite yet because I know that it is either a direct sequel or a companion novel to the first book, but this is a retelling of King Lear. Just like, I love Shakespeare. This may be something that you guys don't know about me. I love Shakespeare. I have seen or read almost every single Shakespeare play. I think I'm missing 5 or 6 that I've never seen or read, but massive Shakespeare fan. I'm a big like theater person, kind of classic theater, and just like, you tell me there's a Shakespeare retelling and I'm gonna jump on it, like, please, especially if it's fantasy. So this looks really great. I'm very excited to read it. I'm not gonna get to it until after I read The Queens of Innis Lear though. And last but not least, I have these 4 books. 3 of them are from my little thingy that I was telling you guys about in my December haul, where I had, through the year 2019, been saving £1 per book that I read, and then I went ahead and bought a ton of books with that money at the end of the year. So most of those came in December, but I had a few books that did not show up in December. So those 3 are Queen of the Conquered by Case and Callender. This is a Caribbean-inspired fantasy that's all about colonization and taking your power back. It looks really good. It only just came out in the UK on the 30th of January though. And I got a copy of An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon, who you may remember from earlier in this haul, who wrote The Deep. And this sounds amazing. It's a space opera that is set on a spaceship. I believe Earth has become uninhabitable, but people are leaving Earth. And there's sort of the system of indentured servitude that's essentially slavery on these ships. It's very much modeled on the antebellum South, which you can go ahead and look into that if you so desire. This looks really great. I've heard really good things about it, and I believe it's a pretty underhyped sci-fi book, so I'm really excited for that. And the last book that I got with that money is Dark and Deepest Red by Anne Marie McLemore. I talked about this in my most anticipated books of 2020 video, I believe. And this is another historical fantasy. It's a YA book, and I believe half of it takes place in 1518 in Strasbourg during the, I think it's the Dancing Sickness. And then 500 years later, we follow the descendant of one of the people who was blamed for that sickness. It looks really good. I'm very, very excited. I've heard great things about their books. And the last book that I have to show you, I just went ahead and picked up a finished copy of The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. If you've seen my Best Books of 2019 video, you probably are very well aware of the fact that this was one of my favorite reads of last year. It made #2 on my list. I absolutely adored it. It's great. Go watch that video if you want to see me gush about it. But I have a proof copy of this book. Where is it? There we go. I have a proof copy of this book. I knew that I would want the finished copy. I don't usually pick up finished copies of books that I receive as ARCs or proofs, whether it's physical or in an ebook edition, but I really wanted this. I knew I would regret it if I didn't get the hardcover version. So I went ahead and picked this up. It was cheap on Amazon at the beginning of the month. And that is it. That is it for my ridiculous January book haul. I'm gonna go ahead and try to implement that whole TBR thing in February. We'll see how it goes. In the comments below, I would love to hear what you hauled in the month of January, if you picked up any good books, if you read anything amazing, or if you've read any of these books, or if they're in your TBR. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.